Is customer data actually that insightful, or can it just confuse you?
Wow, Billy, that is a big question for question one of this conversation. Of course, behavioral data, customer data, contains lots of unknown kind of tales and stories that every business should be looking at, because they will surprise themselves. One of the biggest problems we see in this particular era is that leadership teams still very much want to use kind of intuition and gut instinct. And there is a place for that, don't get me wrong. Like a lot of senior people have decades of experience. They've kind of seen the cycles. They know what to, they think they know what to anticipate. But in today's world, where we're experiencing commerce in a more, well, culture and commerce in a more algorithmic manner, the data has to be part of the picture. So yeah, customer data is essential.
Yeah, data is key.
Mm-hmm.
How directly does the data and technology actually affect outcomes like revenue, like commercial outcomes?
I think that it's important they do.
Yeah.
Things have to be measured. Every process should be measured and should have an ROI allocated to it. I always start with the case of understanding where the use case is. Like, what is the problem? What is the bottleneck in the business? That has a cost implication, and it could be a revenue opportunity. The business might feel like it's optimized, but that's not to say that there could be an opportunity to create more revenue. So really understanding what the ROI opportunity is first is important, and then you can utilize the data required to kind of give yourself that ability to become more optimal, or to discover perhaps an unknown opportunity to grow the revenue.
Yeah. And so in terms of return on investment, ROI,
yeah,
how do you actually measure that when it comes to data?
Yeah, so it has to be related to a use case, for example. So, in today's world, customer-facing merchants may believe they have an issue around customer service, perhaps, and they might decide that they want to use kind of agentic systems to create a better experience for the customer when dealing with questions or complaints. But actually understanding the problem of the ROI there is more complicated than it sounds, because the use case might be the fact that there is another problem downstream that the business doesn't yet understand. So instead of going and implementing a system that gives you scalable chat interface for ever-growing numbers of kind of inbound queries, you might not need that at all. It might be a case there's a systemic problem within the product or logistics within the business, that using some some natural language processing, understanding the sentiment of the data that's coming in through the transcriptions, might actually reveal that scaling chat agents is not actually going to solve the problem. There's a different problem that needs to be looked at first. So, that's where the data becomes interesting, because sometimes the elephant in the room isn't the obvious problem.
Yeah, behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's interesting because obviously I'd say interning at Soul Heaven, but it was probably just a couple of weeks back in the summer 9 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you and the team were obsessive with data back then.
Yeah.
And that was before I even knew what data was really as a concept.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to know more about how you actually used data to actually help the customers. Like, can you actually use it? Could you utilize it back then to help the customer process, help the customer lifetime value in the business?
Yeah, so I suppose, that was 9 years ago.
9 years ago.
Yeah, okay. I think what might be interesting is to kind of provide a bit of context about what was happening 9 years ago, what's happening today, maybe what was happening before then. So in 2007, I came off the back of a 9-10 year career in investment banking. And when I relocated to the Northeast, those kind of opportunities weren't present just because that sector wasn't operating in the region. So I took that opportunity to start a footwear business. Called Soul Heaven. And now it's just an interesting one because this was kind of like reading what was coming next in not only commerce but also in community building and in trend, lifestyle trend, fashion trends. I felt there was a missed opportunity to have like a really interesting community-driven retail business. And to be honest, before Facebook, it probably wasn't possible. There was a few enablers that helped Soul Heaven grow and become omni-channel footwear business, award-winning, over a 10-year period. And some of those are kind of hardware and software that helped enable that. First of all, it would have been the social networks of Facebook and Twitter. And then it was later in the life cycle was mobile commerce, all of which were really important for that business. But you're right, a big part of that is data. How do we know how to forecast which products we require? A lot of that was cultural knowledge through me and the team, but we're also looking for interesting metrics across social media. And then when we were operating the business, how do you scale e-commerce? These people aren't walking through your door. You can't talk to them. You have to use your Google Analytics packages, try and understand what's working, what isn't working, where people are bouncing, exiting. That's all customer data is virtual, it's numbers, but there are insights there. And to be honest, we did a CRO project over the course of 6 months, and we increased conversion rate by 92% for a 50K investment, which was colossal. And that was all about, page design combined with traffic to measure which designs led to the best performing pages, which led to more transactions, and then using good old statistical significance to validate those choices, knowing full well that those data points are accurate, trustworthy, and scalable, and then the business can, improve from there. So yeah, Soul Heaven, even in 2010 to 2012, Google Analytics was a big part of scaling an e-commerce business, and certainly for us. We even used a bit of AI in 2015.
What kind of AI?
That was it's probably just, we describe it as a recommendation engine now, I suppose.
Yeah.
I don't know how much AI was in there thinking about it. It's more like a rules-based solution. But at the time, it was pitched as AI, and it was pitched to help personalize the shopping experience. And I still think a lot of retailers are still trying to find the right personalization tools today.
Yeah. Do you feel like the technology tools have actually changed that significantly over the last few years? Because it seems like it from an outside point of view.
Yeah.
Obviously, the sales teams have started to use the bigger buzzwords like AI.
Yeah.
But are they that different?
Well, I suppose no. When I look at, in my day job, I head up data science now, research for Club 1984, and where do I get the data from? First of all, data pipelines, data engineering is fundamental. We use fundamentally CAIO for email marketing, Meta and Google for social, paid and organic, Shopify Plus for our transactional data, and then some GA4 just to make sense of it all, because there's attribution challenges across all the platforms. So trying to get a single source of truth is very difficult. That's the same data sources that I would have been looking at 10 years ago. They're the same data problems we looked at 10 years ago. There are always going to be issues around how the consistency in which data is collected and stored is very difficult. Today's AI landscape requires consistent and reliable data fundamentally. That's still a problem. And I think that will always be a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. And those tools for data engineering, obviously mainly SQL development,
Yeah.
and then the various cloud development tools. But are they fundamentally the same?
I'm really very much focused on using SQL and Python for most of my work. I just find that's where I'm most comfortable, most familiar. It has a lot of flexibility. There's a lot of libraries that can be used. Other people have their own preferences, and obviously AWS and Azure are always launching something new in the cloud. But to be honest, the environments that we use with Club, we don't necessarily need or require their cloud services, in that kind of way. So maybe it feels a bit more manual, but it feels like we know what we're doing. There's less of a black box kind of concern around what's happening when you're piping the information, the data into the cloud, and what transformations are these off-the-shelf packages performing. Sometimes doing the feature engineering yourself gives you faith that the data going in is correct, therefore you can trust the output implicitly.
Yeah. And in terms of AI, specifically on the new technologies, what are you working with at the moment? What's catching your eye?
So there's a project, I'm calling it like a retail intelligence system, which is going to use Club's proprietary data, again collected by CAIO and Shopify, etc. And its purpose is to just enable us to have an LLM that is proprietary, that we have on our own GPUs, and it learns from our data. And so it becomes highly attuned to what the brand is and how it behaves, how customer data behaves. I think that the larger LLMs like ChatGPT and Claude, they are amazing, but they're such generalists.
Yeah.
And they're non-deterministic in the sense that you ask it the same question more than once and you get a multitude of answers. That isn't always reliable. It's great for creative tasks. If you're copywriting or doing marketing roles, looking to create information on the fly that you want to use as kind of just get ideas down and to get teams around you thinking about new concepts, really powerful. It would take you to places that you wouldn't ordinarily go. So it's great for that. But if you need precision, they're not great, shall we say.
Not yet.
Not yet. But they are, like I say, they are generalists. So I think the world will become a place. The environment will become a place where businesses will have their own, systems, LLM powered systems that understand their data, their segment, their customer base, as well as the staff that work in the business.
It makes sense, and we hear the term agentic AI or AI agents a lot these days.
Mm-hmm.
And what's your opinion on AI agents generally? Like, how sophisticated are the technologies within agentic AI?
Yeah, so my experience is growing. I have built some agentic systems. I would say that they need guardrails. They can be unreliable. They can create cascading failures as well. So if one agent is unable to complete its task, all the other agents fail. And really, for the purpose of accuracy, you want the agents to be falling back onto kind of baseline outputs because they're feeding the wrong information. So a bit more like a Chinese whisper. It becomes more and more further from the truth or further from the task that they're set out to achieve. So I've recently been building a tool called the AI Discoverability Index, and the purpose of that is to help brands and merchants understand how visible they are within the world of AI search. Whether it's Gemini, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's Claude, Perplexity, people are discovering and researching their interests through conversation. And at the moment, the attribution of those conversations doesn't really exist. It's incredible for the frontier models to gain all this extra context. So if we just step back slightly, if we talk about typical search through Google, they're like a few keywords. And then you get 15 links, 20 links, and you click a few, and you're just trying to find something that feels interesting. But with conversational search, there's a richness of context available. So, for example, it might be, I'm going to watch the F1 at Abu Dhabi with 6 friends. We're flying on a Friday, leaving on the Monday. I don't know what to wear. What's the temperature going to be like? We're also going to be leaving the track and going for a meal. How do I book taxis? You immediately get this rich contextual conversation. They know where you're going, who you're traveling with, what the itinerary is, what gaps are missing in terms of like outfits, travel. And then suddenly, the information is incredibly useful. But at the moment, as I say, there is no like leading attribution tool to say which brands, which services appear in those conversations. So this agentic system, the AI Discoverability Index, is there to help brands and merchants understand how often they're appearing in conversation, why that's happening, which prompts are triggering that, and also which citations are present as well. So the large language model will ultimately be thinking about kind of 3 things when it's going to provide a recommendation. Good quality data from the merchant, so structured data within their website that tells that they fully understand what they do, what services or products they offer. The other part would be heritage and brand voice. So they understand who the founders are, how long the business is going for, where they sit within their niche, right? And then the other part of it is citation. And so the citation piece is about trust, recommendations. What do other people say about this product or service? Is it highly recommended? Are there bad reviews? Is it in the press? All those kind of things. All that is added together. So, so coming back to the agentic AI, there's a lot of dimensions there to measure. So there's 12 agents that run in parallel that crawl and collect information. They analyze the structure of the data, the semantics, the context, the citations, the values, the brand voice, and then they provide like a score. Agents can be incredibly powerful. Like that's not something you could do without it, and that's my experience. That they take a lot of preparation to make sure they behave in a reliable way, because again, there's an LLM involved. They have to interpret and reason, contextualize, provide outputs without really strict guardrails. They could be improvising quite badly. And you certainly wouldn't want that when you're trying to index your business against other peers within your marketplace. So they're very, very useful. I'm not sure the world is quite as ready for them as it appears. I think there's still a lot of fiddling to do.
Yeah. Do you put that down to the technology that's available at the minute? Or do you feel like we haven't worked out what the application is for the tech?
Yeah, I think it's just a case that we're all working out where they're strong, where they're weak, and how to have the right systems in place to control their workflows. Like I say, everything is so nascent. People are literally discovering these solutions, building them for the first time. There's no guidebook. It's a case of everyone's using their instincts and intuition, previous experiences to come up with like a structure they think will work. And it becomes trial and error to a degree.
Yeah. In terms of the fashion industry then, you've obviously been in that world for a long time now. How do you think we are going to use AI agents within that world? Say fast forward a year or two down the road.
Yeah, now it's challenging, right? So there's some things that agents would be great for, but I'm not sure the people in the industry are ready for them. if you know what I mean. Again, this is something that is like entwined with like culture, and sometimes you need to get a feel, like empathy. You need to have that to really understand where the trends of the market is moving to. And I think sometimes machinery in that sense is too cold. I think what would be amazing in a few years' time, one of the big challenges with fashion, and it's always the same thing, is being on trend, right? It's the right product for the right market at the right time. Really, really difficult to manage. And some brands have just got the clout. They can do whatever they want because they have the size and scale to basically have influence, even if it is algorithmically. They will, and Adidas have done this brilliantly, to be fair, in the last couple of years, where we were post-pandemic. Nike were essentially looking to move into the video game space with NFTs, with the Artifact product, which were virtual sneakers that you could customize, and they were all NFTs. You could buy and trade them, and they boomed. You know, they made many millions from that project. It's now been mothballed, and they moved into Fortnite. So they felt that actually nurturing young gamers wearing Nike product in game was going to be their future. And they're probably not wrong, but it's a really long cycle, you know, from an 8-year-old playing Fortnite to wearing a pair of like Air Max 95s. It's years, right? It's not that they're going to get them like that quarter or at Christmas. It might be a long time. What Adidas did was, while Nike were kind of totally distracted with this, which felt big at the time, right? Nike would kind of look like they were really innovating, really following what their brand has done historically, innovated with their footwear technology. Adidas thought, like, what can we do? We just need to try and leverage what we're known for, and that's going back to court shoes. And then what do we see? In the female sector, we see Sambas, we see handballs, we see Specials, Gazelles. They've been able to have a really big say in the footwear market by using their back catalogue, by using their ability to reach people, their spend. And so range planning using AI is really difficult. Sometimes you have to just use really strong creative direction to create something really interesting that people will follow. If you try and like ride someone else's trend, it moves too quickly and you'll just fall behind. So there's a few things. I'd like to imagine there's a place where a range planner and a creative director have like a dashboard where they're seeing like live sentiment through social media and trend from runway shows, concerts. They're just getting all this information, feeding in, where they can start to dynamically develop. Or maybe even the Gen AI tools can start to immediately develop and suggest collections that could be really, really saleable in the short term. So we might be in a place where range planners are heavily supported by agentic tools, which are understanding kind of like real life feeds from events to help develop products. Otherwise, I would say that we're probably more in the marketing and sales space, where there's just it's a different set of problems, but more suited to agents.
Yeah, that's really interesting. In terms of marketing as well, I've seen several brands start to implement AI or generative AI photos, videos. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of businesses in the US that are going gung-ho on it. And everything they've advertised over the last few months is just generative AI. Yeah. And it works. Or at least it seems like it's working now. Yeah. Do you think that we are effectively going to move into a society where every brand needs to adopt Gen AI for marketing and advertising? Or do you think it's just a bit of a hype cycle? It'll die off?
Yeah, it's... does it interest you?
I find it generally interesting.
Yeah.
It's weird, but...
Do the campaigns talk to you? Would you buy based on what you've seen?
Well, I don't think I have.
No. Okay. No, it's interesting because I think it's going to be individual.
Yeah.
I think for some sectors it might work really well, for others less so. I'm certainly not interested in it myself, and Club aren't interested in it either. There's a term called AI slop, which I'm sure you've probably heard about. And this is just kind of like people generating kind of low quality, unwanted content, visual content or otherwise. And I think at some point we'll find in our TikTok feeds, in our Facebook feeds, in our Spotify feeds, we'll be able to switch off AI content, because I think some people will just want that toggled away. They're not interested.
Yeah.
I can see how it's really interesting for in-house work. So, sometimes you'll just have a great idea on when you're riding a bike, on a weekend, and you just need to communicate that to your team somehow. Great. Jump into Sora or any Gen AI tool and create a visual storyboard that you can then share your excitement and communicate with your team, but then go out and build it, go out and create it for real. It's great for all that exploratory work, fast. You can really kind of communicate with your teams. But I think if you're going to come down to like, this is our campaign, this is where we're going to invest our quarterly money, you should go and do it for real. Because people need work, people need jobs. There's so much creative inspiration that can come from having a team of people working on something that I would, put my neck out and say you'll end up with a better output. So use it for your research preparation, probably not for your final execution.
Yeah. So how are you using AI generally at Club at the minute?
So it's mainly back of house. It's everything that I'm doing around marketing, forecasting, understanding exactly what's happening with precision. So I would say it's more machine learning, deep learning, Python-based products. Like I say, there are some agentic systems to help us understand our own position in terms of visibility, what conversations are happening that involve Club, and how often are we being recommended and discussed. But otherwise, we're the data's there and it's valuable. And the leadership team want to know what's happening because it adds to that richness, that fabric of decision making. But we're a brand that is, we're a drop brand, which means that we only release products once a month and over a 48-hour period. So prior to that, the website is closed. And because of that, we've adopted, it's organic to be fair, it's authentic. We have a rebellious side, and we want to do things our own way. And sometimes the data has a habit of offering opportunities which should be considered, but actually intuition tells us it's probably not the right decision right now based on where the business is headed. So it's one of these things where it adds to the kind of rich fabric of decision making, but we don't. It's like when you watch a football match, right? You'll see a goalkeeper and their stats are incredible, and you see them for real, and you're just like, what am I missing? And it's like that eye test, and data and decision making is very much like that. I don't think you can trust data blindly, right? It has to be balanced.
Yeah. And in terms of AI applications, similar to that, basically, how are you utilizing data within Club at the minute?
So I would say the kind of the biggest use case, or the most common use cases, is within marketing. So there's a couple of things that happen every month for us, and this is the demand generation cycle that we have, 25 days between each drop. We need to reach as many interested people as possible with the spend that we have available, and we need to understand, we have to trust the social media algorithms to a point, but we need to know we're getting good quality signups for a price range that we're comfortable with, and want to see that consistently. And so we use data to understand how each day of the week looks from like a macro 2-year view, because that will, and it does dictate how we deploy capital. Each day of the week is different, and that's understood from a 2-year perspective, month and day. Also, as I mentioned earlier, there's some issues around attribution. And so what I mean by attribution is that if you're driving traffic to your website via Meta or via Google or via TikTok, Pinterest, they all claim to be like, we're the ones that converted that customer. They might have been the first click, they may have been the last click, they may have been somewhere on that journey. And when you look at customer journeys, often a customer who's shopping for the first time has probably had 8 to 10 touch points with the brand before making a purchase. So they may have seen an ad which they've engaged with. They may have then visited the site, received an email, was a Google searched, clicked another ad. And so understanding what the real attribution is important. So you can obviously take a blended view and say, how much revenue have we made? How many customers have we got? What's our customer acquisition cost? That's great. But what the data doesn't tell you there is what to do next. So if you just blindly do what you did before on repeat, you're not really making any progress, because you don't really understand where the attribution, where the attribution is. What is driving the customer? Which campaigns are really driving the customer? Which platforms? Which sales channels? Which marketing channels? So we use a process called marketing mix modeling. I always trip over that. And it's like it's like a Bayesian statistical process. And again, I'd say this probably is still machine learning, I would say, but it's incredibly powerful. So it gives you a range of probabilities that may happen, and then you can use your judgment as to which ones you trust and where you want to deploy your ad spend next. So where it's really powerful is it informs you on your options based on the next tranche of ad spend. And so it means that you can make progress rather than just living in kind of purgatory if you just trust what the attribution channels tell you. So again, I'd say that's probably machine learning as well. But it's where you want precision, right? If you're spending 100 grand a month on ads, you need to make sure you're investing that capital wisely, because it's high risk. There are some filters that you should look at every business case through the lens of these filters, and you will make a good decision. Not only a good decision on, is it the right thing to do? Is AI the right solution? But also how to measure the outcomes. So first of all, it's all about strategic alignment. So what I mean by that is, why? What's the problem? Like, what don't I understand about my business or about my operation? Or what is costing me a lot of money? And is that limiting the business's ability to scale? So strategic alignment. It's a use case. It's like, why? And then the next filter would be return on investment. So then it's converting that problem into a value. So say it's a forecasting problem. Say we always sell out too quickly. It's a forecasting problem. You're leaving money on the table. Could be the reverse. Say it's 200k. We're all at 200k a month. Every month, we always seem to get that wrong. Okay, so now you've got a problem, a use case, and you've got an ROI, where you've got a cost of the problem. From there, you can start to decide, okay, so if we can fix this problem for 100k, then that puts 100k back in the business as positive income. Okay, so how do we get to that point? How do we improve the forecasting for 100k? Is it AI or is it not AI? And I think you do have to be really pragmatic about that, because AI brings an awful lot of costs. Not only because you need people. A further filter is ownership, right? We'll get there in a second. But when you're looking at AI, not only do you have the infrastructure, the cloud services, the API calls, the model development, all those things come at cost. If you can get to that 100K improvement in your forecasting using another software, then you should, because it's all about the business goal, right? But sometimes it will be AI. Then it kind of comes down to ownership. So you've got your problem, you've got your cost of your problem. You've evaluated a variety of systems, some rules-based software, some SaaS or some AI solutions. You then need ownership. So then you need people who will see this project through. Now the challenge is you might have access to devs who understand the SaaS world and can help you get this built, and it's bulletproof, reliable, and it's going in 3 weeks. If it's AI, you're going to need people who are competent around using AI and using all the different tools, all the different packages, all the challenges around the ML ops, scalability, and those people need to be ready to run these projects. And again, those people are thin on, like you'll know,
very thin.
They're thin on the ground.
Yeah,
people who are actually doing this are thin on the ground. So there's lots of influencers out there on LinkedIn telling people all sorts of stories about how AI is just going to radically transform a business. And in lots of cases, it has that potential. But today, do businesses have the resources? It's the classic thing, isn't it? It's like, do you build? Do you buy? Or do you partner? These are all challenges. Some businesses will just, depending on who they have around them and their level of understanding, will be limited to what they can do. Big enterprises, they'll obviously build. They'll buy in what they need.
They have the capital to do it.
Exactly.
So they can.
Exactly.
Yeah. Say, for example, an organization or a small business had capacity to hire one person and they wanted to just try AI.
Yeah.
It's a broad term, but effectively they want someone who can look at the technologies and find out where they could help the business, increase revenue, cut costs, etc. What do you think they should hire generally? Like, would you hire someone who's really young, say like a 16, 18-year-old who knows the AI and digital world well? Or would you hire someone with a lot more experience who's maybe seen all the trends, all the technologies, and has that broader experience?
Yeah. Now, I'm not biased at all, but I would hire a data scientist.
You have to say that. Yeah.
I do. So I suppose the question is why a data scientist will... data science is kind of agnostic. It's applicable to any industry, right? So it's all about finding business problems. Well, understanding business problems, not necessarily understanding the domain of that particular industry, but it's understanding a business problem, using the data that's available to develop, prototype a solution. And that solution will be thoroughly tested. It'll offer statistical outputs that you can trust. And it's only then should a business start to think about production and scale, because you have your evidence you need. And an AI engineer can run off and build really cool things, but you might not need them. It might not be what your business needs. So data science comes back to, it's a solution focused role. And it's scientific in the sense that there'll be hypothesis testing that the business stakeholders will be a part of, and they'll be run the models, run the experiments, provide statistically significant outcomes, and you move forward from there, you iterate from there. So I would say data science has to be the one.
Yeah. Does it have to be an academic though? Because most data scientists that I see have studied maths at university.
Yeah.
Or they've studied a PhD in data science.
Yeah.
Or masters. And do you think that's relevant? I mean, you studied your master's degree at Cambridge, right?
Yeah.
In data science and AI. So surely you're in the best place to confirm.
Really important. Important. So, I'm just one of these, when I kind of before we sat down for this, Billy, I was just reflecting on parts of my career. And I think I do see patterns not in like a kind of a weird way, but I kind of like, I'm quite sensitive to like things that are potentially emerging. I'm often thinking about the future. I'm often like thinking about what would this be like in 5 years' time? What would that be like in 5 years' time? Are there commercial opportunities around that? Is the dog having a wander? Will you sit down? So, you know, at Soul Heaven, we were using very rudimentary analytics, just using Google and spreadsheets. But then when I went to Cambridge to do the masters, yeah, different world, different landscape. You understand exactly the type of mathematics you need to use, the type of software, Python packages, how to, train like neural networks. So valuable. I'm not saying it can't be done, but when you do an academic course like that, you get the rigor. And so I'm not learning from YouTube. I'm not winging it. This is exactly how it's done. This is how you should always do it. It gives me, and I'm sure everybody who's around my projects, faith that these processes are being done to the letter. Yeah, so I would say that data science is essential for anyone in an AI role. And should they enroll in something academic? I would say, yeah, I believe they should. I think there has to be standards.
So what are the foundations within data science? So when I was at university, I actually applied to study my data science masters. I didn't go through with it, but I found it very interesting.
Yeah.
And there were topics on AI and computer vision, and then the maths, statistic and modeling, and business related topics. But what were you taught at Cambridge in the data science AI modules?
It kind of came down to like three areas, I suppose, at highest level. So maths and stats fundamentally, because that's what AI and machine learning models are built on, right? So it's algebra ultimately, and certainly large language models. The thing about large language models is that they're absolutely fascinating because their use of language is so rich and interesting and persuasive, but it's just maths. It's just probability to predict the next most likely word in the sentence, but it's so plausible. It comes across so well, and everybody just like laps it up. We all do. You get in conversations with ChatGPT, all sorts of random stuff, and it's enjoyable. You get a dopamine hit from it. It's like, but it is just maths, right? So it's not necessarily the truth. It is just what is the most likely word, right? So maths and stats is obviously the first. There's the coding side of things. So you have to learn Python as a prerequisite. Most machine learning models are built using Python libraries. Data engineering side of things is SQL, and with the masters particularly, it was more data science. So we didn't do a huge amount of the data engineering side of things until the very end. I was involved in a really interesting project with the Bank of England, where the Bank of England had a problem where they're receiving quarterly earnings calls from each financial institution. They're particularly interested in the G12, which is all like the world's most important banks, JP Morgan being the most important. And what they do is on a quarterly earnings call, they receive a PDF presentation of the quarterly performance. They receive a spreadsheet with all the financial data. They then receive a video of the executives presenting the earnings call. They then get a transcript of that call, of that recording, and then they might get Q&A with an analyst. And so what makes it interesting from a data science perspective is you've got PDFs, you've got spreadsheets, you've got transcripts, you've got video. They're all different modes, different modals, right? How can you analyze those in parallel, side by side? So they describe that as a mosaic of information that an individual has to try and understand and detect risk signals from. It's impossible for a human to do it. There's too much information to comprehend, right? So the challenge was, can it be automated? So I was part of a 5-person team, and I did the data engineering side of this, where we had to ingest all this data, store it in various kind of different types of databases, vector, meta. Then we had to analyze it using natural language processing, all built in Python. Then we put an agent across the top where you could query different parts of the data. The thing they were most looking for was, does the sentiment diverge from what the executives are saying? Now, the reason they want to know that is because they want to know if the executive is being true to the financial data or whether they're skirting around a topic. And that helps them have real risk-based conversations with each bank. And so that was really, really interesting. And that was a Python and a SQL problem to try and do the engineering piece there. So it's maths, it's coding, and then it's domain knowledge. So are we talking about engineering? Are we talking about retail? Are we talking about healthcare? That would be the domain. And to be honest, it's about asking the right questions. So not every data scientist will be a domain expert. Now I've decided to take my data science journey into fashion or retail because I had that domain knowledge anyway. So all I was really doing was adding the maths and the coding to that. But other data scientists will be mathematicians and coders, lack commercial domain knowledge. So they rely on the team around them, whichever client they're working with or whatever business they're working with, you're depending on them to ask the right questions. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes data scientists do find it difficult to put themselves in the shoes of a commercial problem because they're more academically led. I'm kind of the other way. I'm on probably leaning towards the other side of that. I have the domain knowledge. I understand the problems around for the business. And then I go out and find the data, build the models, try and come up with a solution. So the maths and stats, coding, and domain knowledge.
Yeah. Are they being taught this in school? Like pre-university, pre-college, secondary school?
Should they?
Or are they already? Well, naturally, they're being taught maths.
Yeah.
But probability, statistics?
So boring.
Yeah. So how do you bring out the fun and kind of move them on this journey of data science and AI?
Yeah.
Because it sounds cool doing AI or being a data scientist, whatever that really means. But the journey to get there almost seems like a bit of an impossible challenge. It's obviously realistic because people do it. But how do you start that journey to become a data scientist?
You've got to be curious. I think it's a science discipline. So I think, a lot of people go into the healthcare world because, or like, chemicals or engineering world when they want to do kind of science-based problems. There are hard problems. They want to be part of the team that solves those problems using their scientific processes and rigor. I suppose data is a different medium, but those skills are there. I'm not sure students are being funneled in the right way. Like any careers advice, I think we all got terrible careers advice in school, didn't we? It's one of those emerging careers that I don't think careers advisors know much about, where they would be comfortable recommending it. That may change and should, but we'll just have to see. But yeah, I think there is obviously a foundation of maths and science happening in schools. I don't know whether there's enough coding going on. My son's 11. He does his maths and science. I'm not hearing anything about software development.
Not yet.
No.
I'm trying to think when I was at school. I didn't do much IT. I found it interesting. Don't get me wrong. That's probably why I'm in the industry, albeit from the helicopter view.
Yeah.
But I don't think we were taught like rigorous coding exercises or modules. It was more that you can play around with it if you'd like to, but it wasn't necessarily forced down you. It probably should be, or at least given a proper opportunity to learn about it.
Yeah.
And you said that about the three areas of data science. You've got the maths, computer science, basically, and business.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And all those topics are available at A level or college, right?
Yeah.
So do you think someone would have to study all three modules to become a data scientist, or is it fluid? Could you pick something up later down the line?
I think you could pick coding up later down the line. Yeah, I think maths is a prerequisite. I think, because like I say, the systems are all built using mathematical methods. Having an understanding of that is fundamental. And I think having that curious mind. You've got to be curious because you hit roadblocks all the time, and you can't give up. You can't just be like, you've got to keep working through it. You've got to continue evolving the hypothesis, working out how you're gonna get over each barrier to get to the outcome you need. Even if that outcome actually isn't the commercial outcome the business is hoping for, you still need to complete the process.
Yeah.
And even if it's like a different outcome, you're still learning, right?
Yeah.
You hypothesize again and then
part of the journey.
Continue. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you were a young child now, or let's say you were kind of 15, 16 years old, you're about to choose A-level topics, thinking about university, you want to move into AI, data science, that kind of world. I suppose, how would you stay ahead of the AI curve? What technologies, what would you research?
That is interesting. I suppose there's a lot to take on board, and I'm always driven personally just by like commercial challenges. But some people might just decide that there's something they've seen within a generative tool that they think they can build better. They might have a different use case, and that might be a curiosity that gets them thinking about why and how the system is architected as is, and they might decide they want to kind of come up with their own iteration of that. It probably does stem back to a lot of curiosity. But for young people, I would say that we've gone through. You'll remember some of this, Billy. You're a much younger man than me, but the internet generation, the .com. There's lots of jobs that didn't exist, right? Social media jobs, podcasting, all these kind of things that people do that didn't exist before the internet. There'd be lots of new jobs that exist because of AI. And what I say to my son is, if you do well in maths, you'll have a very, very wide variety of options when it comes to choosing a career. And then when you're in that career, it doesn't mean that is your career forever. Because I think what's really important is that young people are adaptable. I think being adaptable is so important, but also having some of those skills that AI doesn't do. Empathy is one. That human side of life, critical thought. Again, really, really valuable skills. Things that AI can't do, doesn't do. So adaptability, having the fundamentals in maths and science, really, really valuable. Being adaptable and resilient, but also being a good human. Detecting what's going on around you, making good risk calls, good judgment, critical thought. Yeah, I think those would give every individual a really, really good future.
Yeah, I know it's weird because I hear a lot about layoffs happening as a result of AI. And while it's true in some cases, and there's some unfortunate cases like big consultancies making those layoffs, there are several new types of jobs that are emerging. And they are like junior AI consultants or junior AI engineers, business analysts. And they are the ones who are almost leading the charge for AI and helping the senior members of the organization learn about it.
Yeah.
And so I think if anyone is looking to move into the AI world or the industry, because that's certainly emerging, then having that broad understanding of tech and business is crucial to actually get into and break into the industry.
Yeah, I agree.
Naturally very difficult to do so.
Yeah.
But I think there are a lot more organizations now who recognize that AI is going to help them out longer term.
Yeah.
It can improve business efficiency and whatever else, metrics wise.
Yeah, I think there's still, I was reading some metrics last week from S&P, Capgemini. So there's a high degree of interest in AI. Obviously, people interact with ChatGPT. Obviously, there's an issue in lots of sectors around shadow AI. This is where corporate teams, businesses, organizations don't yet have an internal policy on AI. but their members of staff are using it. And so there's issues around risk and IP, and there's a threat there. So staff are becoming more augmented in how they go about their day-to-day and their working process. They're using AI that isn't governed by the organization. That is quite interesting. I completely lost my train of thought there. Where was I going with that one?
It's true. It's a common issue. I hear about it all the time.
Yeah.
And you see some of the bigger retailers, the banks, who are having serious business chats about how do we prevent this happening. Yeah.
What that leads to is an overwhelming sense of confidence. So last week I was in London doing a presentation around some of the topics we've spoken about today, about how do you develop a use case, how do you manage, how do you understand the ROI, how do you go about like testing AI deployments. And we survey the audience, right? So these are like large, medium to large retail merchants, UK-based retail merchants. All of them ranked very low when it came to, data maturity, how they were handling data. Did they have integrated systems? Data hygiene, that kind of thing. You're talking like scoring 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10. But then when it came to like, are you looking to deploy AI in the next 6 months? Are you ready to deploy? 8s and 9s.
Yeah.
It's like there is this disconnect, right? Everyone's like confident, ready to go, but they fundamentally haven't even scratched the surface when it comes to the data preparation side of things, because that will give people sleepless nights for sure. So people want to do it. They don't not really yet know enough about what they're embarking on. So there's some realizations for a lot of like business leaders.
It's interesting. I actually wrote a question down before we joined, and it was based on that. So if you were advising a retail board tomorrow, what's the one thing they should stop doing and one thing they should invest in immediately when it comes to AI?
Like, it's so boring. It is so boring, but it is data hygiene. Like you don't know anything about your business if you're missing data points. So if you look at your customer data, you might have like 10 key metrics you really care about. You might have 1 million customers. When you look at it, like 700,000 of those customers will have missing data points. You can't get a true understanding of what the common behavior is. It really does come down to data hygiene. I hate to say it. Nobody wants to do the job. And I was actually thinking about, is there a way of using AI agents to gamify the data hygiene problem? Because if we would have better data, we would have better models, and we would have better outcomes, and everything would accelerate even more rapidly than it currently is. But most boards would just say that's a cost base, not interested.
Yeah. I hear it all the time.
Yeah.
But would you hire someone to look after data governance, or is it more of a data engineering problem? Do you think it still exists?
No, I think you do have to have someone on the board. I think you do have to have data represented as a chief role, chief data officer,
chief AI officer.
Chief AI officer. I think they're different, actually. I think the chief AI officer is probably competing with the CTO to some degree, because the CTO is obviously from a world of SaaS. That's the world they operate in, and they might not be interested or particularly well versed in the challenges of AI. So I think chief data officer is 100% nailed on, because how every single member of staff or customer interacts with a business needs to have like consistent and reliable data. No free format, nothing like that. Well, obviously you can. Transcriptions will be like that. But something that can be analyzed, measured, and reported on. Once you have that, the tools that the CTO or the chief AI officer build will be incredibly powerful and reliable. So, yeah.
It's almost a mix of both.
Yeah. But it's the horse and the cart as well. Yeah. It's like it's like if you're baking a cake, for an analogy, right? If the recipe says 4 eggs and you put 2 in, the cake's not going to be great, is it? It's probably not going to rise. It's not going to be the cake, And it's the same with your data. You have to get that right. It's foundational, but like I say, like it needs to be framed in today's world. It has to be framed differently to that, because a board is not going to be that committed, because it just seems like a laborious task.
Yeah. Just before we close, I'd like your prediction for the end of 2026. Obviously, technology has advanced pretty quickly this year. It's been exciting. But a year from now, what major advancements will we see across the digital e-commerce retail space?
I touched on it. I think like last year we had, so 2024, we could just say that was the year of like the large language model, right? Lots of excitement around the versions of ChatGPT, and then the competitors with Claude, and Grok were a little bit late to the party, but Perplexity. Then we obviously moved into agents. Now, agents will span into next year, and I think they'll become more commercialized next year, even though everyone's talking about them this year. But actually, I think the true functioning use cases will be next year. I think we will start to use agents in our browsing experience. They will start to do some of the heavy lifting for us. I'm a bit bored of this use case myself, but I'll use it because it's one that's familiar, is that when you try and book a holiday, people don't go to travel agents so much anymore. We all go to aggregation websites, try and find locations, price. But with an agent, you can find experiences as well. You can also get them to go out and find times and costs that fit your budget. I think that will become more usable. It functions now, but it's not very satisfying. I think back of house next year, I think that people will move away from using LLMs, and they'll be using, let's call them small language models for argument's sake. The technology within the transformer architecture has improved. You can now have them on site, or within the architecture of a business, and I think businesses will be training the model to understand who they are, what they do, why they do it, who their customers are, what they want, and it'll become kind of highly tuned for every single business. So I think we'll be moving towards LLMs that are going to be this generalist that people use day to day, but I think from a commercial perspective, we'll move to a small language model that's going to be highly trained on the intricacies of individual businesses.
That's awesome. We'll have to see how it happens.
Yeah. It's advancing, right, all the time. But there'll be something else that kind of comes out from a lab in Silicon Valley that will, tear up and create lots of news. But being a data scientist, I see things through a practical lens. Trying to get too excited by the hype. I'm thinking like, what can people actually use now? We can't continue to throw compute at this problem, because I heard Meta, I was reading yesterday that Meta were trying to open a data center the size of Manhattan.
Yeah.
It just blows your mind. Like, what is the resources that are going to be required to build and power that? It's like, where's justification environmentally for that? So I think with those kind of conscious decisions, we'll see that we can try and harness technology we have and make it specialized to each business use case.
Yeah, awesome.